So you're going to add 30-something million people, about 35 million, and take 575 billion out to pay for another entitlement. That's a train wreck waiting to happen. There's another little thing in that bill that I want to tell you about that I honestly believe is the biggest decision the Supreme Court will make about this little thing right here. It's called the individual mandate. Now, I think everyone as a physician should have health insurance and have access to health insurance. But to be forced by the U.S. government to buy a good or product that you or service you do not want, I don't believe is in this right here in the U.S. Constitution. And the 11th Circuit Court just ruled 2-1 that it was not constitutional. To show you how boring my life has gotten, I read Judge Benson's ruling in Florida twice. It's about 65 pages. It's not hard to read. It is extremely well thought out and annotated with footnotes. I don't know how that bill with his judgment, the district judge in Florida, how that's going to be held constitutional. Because if it is, there is not one thing that the federal government can't force you to do with the Commerce Clause. Why couldn't they come to my practice and say, hey, we're going to roll unemployment, you've got to hire 20 people. I don't know how you would say I don't have the money. Well, a person that may not have the money to buy a health insurance policy that the government mandates what's in the policy. So I will rant on about that, but I'll leave that and move forward. There is one other aspect of the health care bill I want to bring up because it's a bill that I'm the lead sponsor of. There's a provision in the health care bill called the Independent Payment Advisory Board. And what that board is 15 unelected bureaucrats appointed by the President, approved by the Senate, who have control of how Medicare dollars are spent. A Democrat, Congressman Neal in Massachusetts, said he thought that was a bad idea, and when the bill was still unpassed, I signed a letter with him and 50 other Democrats, and not many Republicans, because I think it's a terrible idea. It will do three things. One is when the federal government decides how the money is spent, when you reach a certain ceiling of spending, it's not based on quality and access. It's based on strictly cost. So what will happen is you will lose access to your physician. If you do that, the quality of your care goes down, and the cost to you as an individual is going to go up. After being in the U.S. Congress for 2.5, almost 3 years, I don't want them in charge of determining if I have a bunch to pay. I want to make that decision. And who should be making health care decisions are physicians and patients and their families, not insurance companies, and certainly not the federal government. You do not want them in charge of that. So anyway, that happened. The health care bill was, and by the way, the House bill, as bad as it was, is actually better than the Senate bill that we passed. The Senate bill came up, it never had a committee hearing, it never went through any process other than, here it is, take it or leave it. So we got that. The other vote that we had, which was, I did get to vote yes, I had to put a clothespin on my nose, but I voted yes, which were some aspects of the extension of the Bush tax cuts. And we were talking a minute ago about the death tax. I think the inheritance tax, if you confiscate, the federal government confiscates 55% of what you've done in your entire lifetime, that is immoral. To take away the work and sweat and equity of generations and consume it with the federal government because you had the audacity to die. I have a problem with that. And we've got that held off for 2 years, but the Bush tax cuts expired at the end of 2012. So that's only about 15 months, 16 months, we're going to deal with this again. So we were sworn in. All we're talking about when we're in the Congress, let me explain to you how big this government got. I want you to listen to this number. In discretionary, non-defense spending, discretionary spending, non-defense, that's education, commerce, so forth. It'd be like us when we pay our house note, our water bill, light bill, stuff's got to be paid. What you got left, has increased in 2 years, 84%. You did not hear me wrong, 84%. Without the stimulus bill, it's up 24%. When I got to Congress, there were a couple of things that bothered me. One were earmarks. Remember those? Well, there were about 20 of us that got there. the president said, I'm not going to sign any legislation that has earmarks. The first budget, which was a omnibus spending bill, I forgot about that little 1,000-page jewel that we passed. It had, you didn't hear me wrong again, 9,000 earmarks. 9,000 earmarks. Well, about 20 of us on our side said, we just believe that's wrong. Yeah, naked voices. Jim Flake's the guy who's running for Senate in Arizona. Flake said, look, we ought to stop doing this. If we really believe what we said, we should stop doing this. So what do? In this budget that's coming along and the continuing resolution, guess how many earmarks are in the budget? 0, not 81. And there will not be one in this year's budget. So that's something we have done. First thing I did when I got there, I thought it's inappropriate during a severe recession for congressmen to be getting an increase in their salary. The way this occurred was, it was pretty slick. I've never had a job like this in my life. What you did was you had to vote not to take a salary increase. How many of us are going to vote for that? Well, that's pretty hard to do. Nobody. I co-sponsored legislation to do away with that. So my first 2 terms, 4 years in U.S. Congress, there will be 0 increases in the congressman's salary. I think that's appropriate when there are 9.2% unemployment in America and probably 17% of people unemployed who quit looking for jobs. So I think that was a reasonable thing to do. The second thing we've said is businesses have cut back. Why did the Congress cut back? Well, we did. And we've had 2 different pieces of legislation. The second one hasn't been passed yet, but it will be. We will cut my budget for my staff that's here tonight, and I want to introduce him before I get through. My staff is here by 10%. So if companies and businesses and families have to do that, it's appropriate that a congressional office should do that. So we have done that. So we've done a couple of things. It's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things, but it's the right thing to do. So we started this year, and what did this discussion start at? It started with a continuing resolution. We have not passed a budget. This is unbelievable. But we had not passed a budget an entire year. Why? Because people did not want to have a budget to vote on during election year. How ridiculous is that? That's the one thing the House of Representatives in this little book says we're supposed to do, is a budget. It's the first time since modern budget year in 1974, no budget was passed. We passed that, and you heard a lot of discussion about the continuing resolution and so forth. The thing that disturbed me about that, and if you would, I'm going to stop now because I want to introduce you. You'll understand why I feel the way I do. If you're a veteran in this room, please stand up. Let's acknowledge your service to our country. Resolution didn't pass, soldiers in the field fighting for our freedom and the global war on terror would not be paid. Folks, the first paycheck we should write to anybody in the United States of America ought to be an active duty soldier in the field protecting the freedom that we have. That's the first paycheck. Paycheck we ought to write. I want to talk about that. The last paycheck we ought to write ought to be to a congressman who doesn't make sure that the first paycheck is rich. As a veteran myself, that is number one. And I want to diverse just a moment to talk about Afghanistan, the Patriot Act, and so forth. And some of you may agree or disagree with me here. I've been to Afghanistan. I know the TV camera's on. I'll just say, because of security reasons, sometime in the future, I'm going to be going back. The Taliban, I figured they'd take a bunch of, that'd be good for them, but not a few congress calls. I'm not going to tell you telegraph when I'm going to be there, but it won't be too long when I'll be there in Afghanistan. Alexander the Great was there 2,300 years ago, and he left. And he got out. The British got out. The Russians got out. We're spending $1 million per soldier per year with huge budget deficits. Our mission when we went to Afghanistan